Hello guys, and welcome to the last video in this chapter where I will be talking about posing 3D models. The reason that this video is in this chapter is precisely because although posing 3D models is a very general subject, I do like to approach it from a composition perspective. The way you pose your model, or rather what you do with your posed model, can influence your decisions on composition, whether you already have a sketch or not. So that's where I'm coming from. I'll start by explaining a 3-step process. It's something I recommend using when you work with 3D models, but most of the time this isn't the process I follow. I use 3D models in my comic, so the sketch isn't strictly a sketch, but looser lines from the thumbnail that I directly place the models over. Outside the comic, the sketches get more detailed and relevant, but I also don't use 3D models. I'll explain this in bigger detail in the next chapter. In the sketch phase, you just want to know what the pose is going to be like, roughly where the character is going to be looking, and you might want to get an idea of the expression, etc. You might want to decide what the camera is going to look like as well, and that's what I did here, with something of a low angle and a bit of a camera tilt. The second stage is actually posing the model, and this is the one that I'm going to demonstrate here. There are two ways you can go about this. You can start by adjusting the model from scratch, or you can go here to the pose folder, select body or hand pose, and drag a pose that's similar to the one you intend into your 3D model, then adjust it at will. The pose can be a default one you've saved earlier, or one you've downloaded from the asset store. For the sake of demonstrating how to use the posing controls, I'm going to be creating the pose from scratch. So right now I'm just trying to adjust the model, put the model inside with the sketch inside. The first control that I start by changing is the main body control, so this sort of waist control, because it's gonna decide where the weight of the model is, center of gravity, etc, etc. Second control that I change is the face control, so the one that decides where the model is looking at, and then I start sort of like tweaking things, pulling the arms down. I like to do one thing at a time, but sometimes you do need to make the arms and the rest of the body match. Otherwise, if you pull the body too much and you leave the arms in the same place while using inverse kinematics controls, you'll have a lot of deformation and you might actually break the model a little bit. The first stage is all with inverse kinematics controls, so the ones that allow you to choose the position and not just the rotation of the limbs. I use some of the rotation controls, to adjust feet, hands, etc. I'm usually not too bothered about posing the side that you're not gonna see in the drawing, so in this case I'm only posing the arm that's on the side facing the camera. For things like shoulders, you do need to go in with the forward kinematics controls. And now I'm duplicating the layer and going to the next step. The next step after this would be to adjust the pose to the sketch. I'll start by dragging it over here. The first thing that I notice here is that the camera isn't exactly placed the way it's supposed to be. So I'll go into the camera settings tab and adjust the roll value, which affects its tilt, until it seems to align better. Another thing I might want to check is whether the actual perspective matches the idea that I have with the sketch. If I press the ruler and make it visible, like this, I can see the horizon line and whether it roughly matches the perspective that I've established for the sketch. Another thing that might not have a very obvious effect on the character, depending on the position relative to the viewer, is to increase the perspective with the slider here. In this case, for instance, it doesn't affect the model that much, but if I look at the perspective ruler grid, I can see that it's affected by a decent amount. If you've got a setup that allows you to manipulate a model in CSP with relative ease, posing it shouldn't be too complicated most of the time. The last thing I'll do for this chapter is to show you another small time lapse of me reusing a pose while changing very little about it, and readjusting the camera as I might in a storytelling sequence, for instance. Right, so I've already got the character posed with the pose that I created beforehand and I had saved. Just for the sake of exemplifying it, it's a random pose, and I created a bunch of different shaped panels, and I'm just gonna pose the character, you know, again, as I said, as I would for a comic sequence, for instance. Just to show you how easy it is to get a sequence of seemingly different pictures from the exact same pose and the exact same model. This is sped up by 2 times, but the whole process took me about 7 minutes, no longer than that. When we get to the comic/sequential art chapter, I'll explain a bit more about the panels, you know, the process of actually duplicating the model and using it on different panels, etc., etc. There is one thing to be careful with when you're using 3D models and the perspective ruler, and that is that the perspective ruler will deform your model. So if the camera focus is, for instance, on the chest, then if you increase perspective a lot, the head is going to be deformed. It's going to like increase too much. So one of the ways you can avoid this is by centering camera to object. There's an option to do that with the camera, and so if your focus is the head, the character head, you can press the head control and then center the camera there. And also just be careful with using too much perspective. Second stage, I'm just gonna sketch over the model really quickly, again just to emphasize how easy it is to create an actual sketch layout for a comic or something without needing to create a full new pose or a full new model for each panel. So as you can see, playing around with perspective, camera angles and light sources can establish a full storyboard for you without much need of adjustment or redraws. To me, this is one of the main advantages of incorporating 3D assets into your work. Even if I don't encourage tracing directly over their entire body for a number of reasons, I definitely think that if you can use this technique to skip the bulk of the sketching or planning stage of your comic work or illustration work, then you should definitely try. That closes this chapter. Next chapter, I'll dedicate a video to each part of the process of creating a single illustration from start to finish and show you the techniques that I've used the most for each. See you then!